Hi, I'm Graham Richardson Locke. Welcome to our second series of FESPA Coffee Breaks. It's great to be back after a short break with some new topics and some great guests. Since the last webinar, I've broadened my role at FESPA. I'm now the Head of Associations and Technical Lead. As a member of the senior management team, I'm responsible for supporting our international member associations and continuing to develop technically interesting material across FESPA's specialty print communities. I'd also like to let you know that I've been working in screen and large format digital printing for more than 35 years. I initially trained as a screen printer, and my passion for print has led me through roles in management and directorships in point of sale, textiles, and military electronics before I joined the FESPA team. I really believe in the value of peer-to-peer networking and know that my knowledge has been enhanced by taking part in a great number of events and conferences that have been supported by FESPA. I think as an international specialty print trade federation, FESPA continues to focus its efforts on knowledge sharing and community building within the screen and wide format digital print landscape. Since FESPA's foundation 59 years ago, its goal has been to help print businesses using screen and digital printing to advance and take advantage of the latest technology. We aim to keep today's session to about an hour, as we understand that your time is limited. We hope, I can't believe the phone's just going off. We hope that you'll benefit from your participation and you'll find some useful tips to build on that will support you in a disruptive and challenging marketplace. I'm now going to share through the power of Kellyanne the topics and question slides with you. It's funny the technical glitches that happened. I actually thought I just turned off the phone ringer before setting up today. Clearly didn't do a good job of that. Okay, so as we consider today's session, I'm glad to draw on the knowledge of two printing industry experts, Paul Sherfield, founder and owner of the Missing Horse consultancy, and Craig Dennis, who's a director of Colour Den. I'm going to let them introduce themselves to you in a minute. The topic today, of course, is ensuring the best colour reproduction, focus to hit the target. This discussion will focus on planned workflows and the importance of identifying the customer's expectations and how to advise on setting a target for production to achieve. We'll consider the priorities for success, of which consistency, clarity, and measurement, either on a job-by-job or workflow validation basis, are essential. I'm now going to share with you the panelist slide. So you'll note on this slide the email addresses of all three of us. If this will be shown again at the end of today's session, if you have anything that you wish to follow up on or any questions that we don't manage to get to, then please feel free to contact us afterwards. It's sometimes very difficult with the number of questions to answer them all. Okay, so Paul, I'm going to ask you to go first and give us your introduction, and then Craig, if you'd follow on, that'd be perfect.
Paul, you're muted. You're muted. Sorry. There you are.
I'm back. I do apologise.
You're back.
Zoom wonderful. Yes, I'm Paul Sherfield. I run the Missing Horse consultancy, which is basically me. Been doing it for 21 years now. We look at all things workflow, all things colour management. Especially interested in promoting the use of complete colour managed workflows to both clients and printers. Before this, I was in the printing industry, in sales and in pre-press. My company through the 90s was a beta tester for Cytex and then Cytex Creo, and that got me into colour management very, very early in the 1990s. I also represent the UK on various ISO committees for printing standards. I run a certification scheme in the UK for the BPIF, the British Printing Industries Federation, for certifying print quality, which is based on ISO printing standards. And I'm fortunate enough to represent FESPA as a colour management ambassador.
Thank you, Paul. Craig, let's hear a bit about your backgrounds, please.
Well, I'm director of the Colour Den with my son. We offer professional pre-press services and 3D POS design and repro-ready artwork, amongst other things, a bit of colour management as well. But obviously I've been in the industry, like everyone else, quite a long time now, over 35 years. Started as an apprentice, 17 at Display Craft Limited in South London, and worked with some great professionals during that time as well. Progressed into management there and then moved on to a company called Lordswood Litho in Kent for a little while, then back to Displaycraft, but by then they'd become St Ives Print and Display.
Yeah.
So I was working for them for a few years. And then I moved on to DS Smith Packaging. And the rest is history, really.
Okay, perfect. Okay, before we get into the questions for today, I'm going to launch a poll, and I'll please ask you to take a minute to just let us know what kind of printer you are, so that we can be clear. That'd be terrific. Okay, so I'm just going to launch that now. I would say this feels like the longest minute because it's
Only been 10 seconds, Graham.
I know. I must be a very impatient person, I think.
No.
Okay. Well, that was half a minute. It's time for a little bit of coffee, I think.
That panel needs a ticking clock on it, so you can see.
I have, it does actually, which is helpful to me.
Right.
And being a stickler for, if I say a minute, if only I could apply that to the running length of the webinar, I would probably be a better man than I am.
It's stopping Craig talking, isn't it, really?
I don't think we should start down that road at this point.
I try not to talk too much, I promise.
Let's at least get half an hour in. Okay, brilliant. So we have amongst us today, it won't surprise you, 75% of our audience have interest in digital printing. We have 45% with an interest in screen print. And of course, within this poll, we can have multiple processes represented. So, because otherwise it would add up to about 700%. Yeah, a good mix of screen and digital printers, and we thank you very much for helping us with that. And I will now crack on. Okay, so without further delay, let's begin with our first question. So what are the key stages in establishing consistent and reliable production to maximize our yields and prevent mistakes? Craig, I think probably going to ask you to kick off on this one.
Okay, well, when I went to DS Smith, I had the privilege of working with the late David Atchison, who was a director of FESPA UK. And together we kind of established a really good rapport. In fact, he became my best friend. We were best friends. He wasn't just my boss. But one of the things I think that's really important here is establishing what you want to achieve as a business, which is what we did together. And it's really important that all the departments within the business work well together, that there's no rivalry, there's no one who has any other agendas, that you're all on the same page and you all know the goal that you want to achieve. Other things that you can think about are establishing partnerships with the suppliers. So if you've got a preferred suppliers, build up a relationship with them, because often they can provide you with levels of technical expertise that you might not have in-house. Also, I think making sure your equipment is well maintained so it's safe and performs to its best. Your staff are trained. It's something that I'm really passionate about. As a manager at DS Smith, I always endeavour to make sure my staff were trained well and were able to keep up to date with the latest software solutions. And establish some best practice. Try and work to a standard and make sure that everything that you do is set up well. So you make sure that you work well with your ink providers, that you sort of standardize the substrates that you want to work with, your finishing equipment. Just look at your whole process, and these will help you to prevent any mistakes in your process. And obviously then you're going to maximize your throughput and yield.
Okay, great, thank you. Paul, what would you wish to add?
Well, continuing from what Craig said, I think a lot of printers over the last year or so will have had an opportunity to really look at their systems, their markets, and their staff even, and see if it was actually suitable for purpose. Without going into a lot of detail on colour managed workflows, which are important, your products, your workflows, the way you interface with your client to avoid mistakes and make sure you print the expected, needs to be fine-tuned. It needs to be absolutely correct. It's important for serving your client's needs, and it's important for maximising your own efficiency. Removing the touch points, removing the irritations of getting poorly supplied PDFs that don't suit the purpose of the printed product. So it's a question of really knowing your product, really knowing what products your client wants to buy, and producing them efficiently, and setting up a workflow from the files you get in to the finished product, which can be based, as Craig says, on standards your clients know and adhere to in the same way as you. I mean, printing the expected is a phrase from FOGRA, and it really just about covers all of what we need to do in colour management, in process control. But if printing that expected result actually means you're interfering at every stage of the process and correcting clients' files and correcting your own dot gain curves, correcting your own device profiles all the time, just to match something you may have printed 3 months ago, you are not in control of your process. Two other areas, just before I stop. Proof approval procedures need to be defined very carefully. They need to be understood by your client. Is this a proof for colour? Is this a proof for colour and content? Is it a content only proof? Do I only need to check the corrections I made? It needs to be defined very carefully, and a lot of things I get involved in is defining approval cycles, proof approval cycles for printers and their clients, because often they don't know what they're looking for. Oh, I didn't know I had to check that. Often comes to mind when suddenly something is noticed wrong on the final job. So having defined approval cycles, proper slips, proper ways of looking at is very, very important. And finally, because the standard of files from clients is so poor, for print service providers to provide advice on training on how to submit those press ready files which are ready for their colour managed workflows, and so they can go through the system without touching the sides. It's so important. People are trying to reduce these so-called touch points and become more efficient.
Okay, great, thank you, Paul. Moving on to our second question today, and again, Craig, you're going to be the first one to respond to this. So what benefits have you experienced from taking the time to profile your presses and get your workflow in order, and kind of how long does it take in your experience?
Well, when I was working with David Atchison at DS Smith, we in 2004, I was brought in as his repro manager, and we had two color size, large format size machines. That we didn't have any digital right in the early days. But the way we benefited was having a complete system from Fujifilm. Really, all of our emulsions, our inks, our mesh, they were all supplied by Fujifilm. And it was coincidence, really, that we ended up with a Fujifilm workflow called Rampage, which was then later superseded by XMF. But we also had a computer-to-screen system, which was an inkjet system by a company called Heinrich Mantel in Switzerland, and that was sold by Tima KPX here. And what the way we benefited, what David wanted, he wanted to make sure that he could interchange his screens from one machine to the other, because obviously when you characterize a press, or fingerprint a press, they're always going to print differently. Yeah. So what I had to do is I had to come up with a system where we could do that and make sure that the screens were interchangeable, which we did do. And we did that through obviously dot gain measurements and press curves, etc. But also from the proofing side, that was a little bit more difficult, because what they were doing something quite unique. They were using the magenta and cyan from the ink mixing system. So they weren't true trichromatic colors. And the only trichs we used were the yellow and black. And we had the Fuji color manager system that was basically a rebadged GMG color proof system. And we were able to produce progressives for the printers, and it was brilliant. I mean, because we took that time to look into making sure that the presses were interchangeable, it probably took maybe about a week to do. You know, because quite a lot when you got large screens, they were big screens to measure. It was a little bit awkward. And in those days, we didn't have a way of linearizing the screen, so that was a little bit tricky. But we still got some excellent results. Later on, we were able to purchase a 6-color teamer. It was the first of its kind in the UK. It was the Teamer 5070 XL.
That must have had a big shed to put that one in.
It was huge.
Yeah.
It's a really impressive machine. So profiling that was a little bit easier. We had a screen reader by that time, which was given to us by Fujifilm, and so we were then able to linearize the screen, which gave us greater control over our dot gain curves. And yeah, that obviously made things a lot easier having that machine. And then after that, we also bought in it was a fully automatic Inca S40 onset S40, and that had the Clinch Tech automation on it with a robot as well. So we were able to literally set the machine up and just let it run. The operator could actually set that machine up and then go and operate the cutting machines at the same time. So really, in that print hall, you only needed one operator, although from a health and safety point of view, you always had to have two. Okay, but really, realistically, you could run it with one person. And what we did from a color management point of view, right from the beginning, is we put in a color server. So all of our PDFs, which were basically most of our work was generated in-house anyway. They were all color managed before going to the press. So that made it brilliant. We could recalibrate the machine, which we did sort of once a month. And we absolutely rarely had problems with color, and that's the beauty of putting in or taking the time to go through those stages of process control.
I've got, Paul, before you jump in, I've got a couple of questions I'd like, Craig, if you could answer them briefly, please. One is when you're fingerprinting, the print sequence on a CMYK press, there are lots of different views in screen about what the running order should be of the CMYK or order, and also of the type of half toning that you use. So did you standardize both and use them consistently through the process to keep it in control?
Yeah, I mean, my personal view is CMYK is the way that I would generally print, but David had a different way of doing it. He liked to print the magenta, cyan, yellow, black. So we set our system up to do it that way. But later on, I managed to persuade him to change to CMYK. So that was the first thing. And secondly, half-tone dots, I think you just need to find what works best for you. But my preference as a pre-press person was always elliptical, and I have certain dot angles, screen angles that I use, which works well with the screening methods, because what I've found from experience over the years is that each rip has their own screening logarithms.
Yeah.
And so they just work slightly differently. So you do need to experiment a little bit with your screening and the correct screen ruling that you want to use. We made it simple for ourselves. We used 55 screen all the time. We weren't trying to vary. We were printing onto corrugated, so it was a little bit different for us. And that was more than adequate for what we needed to do.
Was that on 150 plain weave meshes?
We started on 150 meshes, but then later on, because we were also printing our spot colors through 140 meshes, later on we made the decision to change to a 140 mesh.
Okay.
And that was fine. Okay. So we just reprofiled everything to a 140 mesh with our halftones, and that was perfect. In fact, if I'm honest, I think we had less issues with moire by going to the 140 mesh than we did on the 150s.
Wow, interesting. Okay. Paul, sorry to cut across you there. Maybe we're time is always a bit of an issue, so maybe I can ask you to now make your response slightly briefer to this question, please.
Yes, I mean, Craig talked at length and very interestingly, specifically about the analog screen side. So I'll just make a few comments on the digital side. One of the issues I find all over the digital print industry is understanding how the color management menus work, and what is a simulation profile and what's a device profile and how they interact. And I know if we'd have had a FESPA exhibition in the last year and the color lab feature, we would have been majoring on that point.
Yeah.
The simulation profile is really what color space you want to simulate. And often it's an offset press, because you might be doing a mixed media campaign, which includes offset. It could include gravure. It certainly would have wide format and maybe some screen. And clients want their images, want their hero images, and they want their brand colors to look the same across many processes. So most digital printers, narrow format and wide format, end up using one of the ISO range of profiles, based on Fogger 39, Fogger 51. Most people will be aware of those. That's a simulation profile, fine. But to make that simulation profile work, you still have to create a device profile for every press on every substrate you're running, or certainly a group of substrates for every press. Because if that device profile isn't working correctly, which interacts with the simulation profile, then your output will not match the expected.
Because you're just skewing the conversion, aren't you? You're not working with reality.
It's the rubbish in, rubbish out thing. It is so important to understand that, and that's not understood. And a lot of people are running with the sort of pre-boxed profiles that come with the equipment, and they give a result, but it will never be accurate and it will never last very long. Presses change, inks change, as Craig said. Environmental conditions change, especially on toner presses, and sometimes just recalibrating the press is not good enough. You do have to make new device profiles.
I think
big,
on that.
one more thing.
Sorry, yeah, please.
And Craig mentioned this. The whole thing about good process control and good colour management is, if something does go wrong, you've got the diagnostic systems to spot it very, very quickly and put it right. Huge return on investment, even just in that area.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I know when we've looked at PressSign and other software for process control, what you can visually see in a report can give you so much helpful understanding of what's actually going on within the process, isn't it? But yeah, they do represent great investment. And I suppose the thing on device profiles, I'm totally with you in that there's no substitute for creating a device profile that actually represents the process that's running in front of your eyes. And I suppose that with many of the manufacturers shipping kind of averaged profiles on their machinery, the issue is that the closer you want to get to the target and the more you want to limit Deltary deviation on tolerancing, the more value is derived from that custom profiling, and it just puts you in exactly the right place, doesn't it?
I mean, and even if your clients aren't sort of very colour fussy, if that's the right word, a bad word, it certainly gives you the ability to tune your presses correctly, so you can do that reprint. So you can, if one press is busy, you can print as accurately on another press. I mean, the times I hear in wide format, oh, we've got this reprint to do, it needs another 20 posters, but the press we printed on it was busy, oh, so it's going to be difficult to do. It gives you the ability to put it on another press that isn't busy, because it will look the same.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to our third question for today. So if I'm considering setting up an automated web to print workflow, in your view, how important is it to incorporate color management, to consider the color management workflow issues and Deltary tolerancing? Craig, would you like to come in on this one?
I think it's a must, isn't it, to have a tolerance for any process. So whether it's, you know, you're going for web to print, is probably even more important that you do this. And so obviously you're going to have your pre-flight tools that ensure that your incoming files are set up correctly to the standard that you set up to make sure things flow through efficiently. And so, you know, understanding what your Deltary tolerances are will be, and the way of measuring it is going to be is important, isn't it? So yeah, I would definitely say you've got to incorporate color management into your workflow in those situations. I mean, I've not worked into a web to print scenario, but I'd imagine in a lot of instances on an approval cycle, people are receiving maybe a PDF or a soft proof as a way of verifying the content before it goes to print. So really the customer's relying on you to print their job well.
Yeah.
You know, so if you've set those tolerances up, then you're not going to get rejects or problems with your customers.
Oh,
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it comes back to reducing the touch points. If you're in a web to print environment, you're looking at very high volumes, perhaps thousands of individual jobs a day. I mean, I've seen that in many of the web to print printers in Europe. So everything needs to be automated. And one of the big areas that people have talked about on many webinars and conferences over the last year has been automation. So building automation, not just on color management, but on pre-flight checking, which I think Craig mentioned earlier in the discussion, and then using color servers. These are very efficient ways of making sure, one, that your PDF structure is correct, or whatever file format you're using, and then taking it into the color space, the color profiles you want for your substrate and your presses. So it's just another reason why you should automate as much as possible all of these processes, and just have a default folder that says nothing's worked, so you're going to have to look at it manually when you've got to get back to your client. It comes back to a point I made earlier. If you educate the 20% of your clients that give you 80% of your work, which is a usual split, you can ensure that most of the files you get will be accurate and suitable for purpose. But people still need to build in some of this more sophisticated equipment. I would recommend some of the colour servers totally, because they can sort out so many problems and do it very accurately. So overall, reduce the touch points, whether you're in a web to print situation or whether you're in a more normal commercial situation.
Engineer for success.
Always good with the phrase, Graham.
Okay, so our next question is, so some customers are very clear on their quality expectations, others less so. Once we've set up a workflow, should we provide a specification for artworking? Craig, I'm favouring you with the first response in today's session, so here we go again.
I think definitely provide them with some guidance on how you would like your artwork to be set up. Obviously, there's advantages in doing that because then they've got clear direction on the settings that they need to apply, and obviously you can provide them with settings if you're asking for a PDF from them. But provide as much detail, perhaps even with diagrams of how you would like things done, that really show clearly your expectations. But perhaps it's a good idea not to make it too much of an idiot's guide. Try and dignify the reader or the person that's going to be doing the artwork for you, that they do have some knowledge about what they're doing. So I think it's good not to make people feel silly. So yeah, make the diagrams and the artwork guides really clear and understandable, that clearly identify what you want. I'll give you an example.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. When I was working for D.S. Smith, obviously most of our work was display. Yeah. And what we were finding is that sometimes we'd have artwork coming in the wrong way round, on a shelf upside down and things like that. So as a pre-press team, when we took on the role of sending the cutters out for artwork, and if they were going out. And so what we would do is we would indicate if there was a pocket and where the pocket would be located on a layer in Illustrator. We would highlight there's a ticket strip on the shelves and which shelves they were on. And that way, the designer could then make sure the artwork didn't interfere with that ticket strip location. We would also put this way up, little bits of text and some annotations on there to make sure that when that artwork came back, it was set up, ready to go to print. And one of our customers, we even provided masks for them to set the artwork to. One of our customers, SC Johnson, they absolutely loved it because they were having their artwork produced abroad.
Okay.
And all we were getting back were PDFs, and initially the PDFs were very, very poor. So by doing this, they were able to set the artwork up correctly, and it solved a massive problem for us from a time perspective, because obviously they wouldn't allow us to make the alterations. So you would receive a file, it would go back, and then obviously you're eating into the time for your production because the artwork wasn't correct. So there's a massive benefit in sending out guidelines.
Okay, terrific. Paul, what would you bring to this question?
I sort of would add more specific things. I work across many markets, as Graham knows. Litho, Gravure, web offsets, wide format, and see that most of the problems that printers have are with PDFs that come in badly prepared. And I always say it's as easy to create a good PDF as a poor PDF. There are lots of specifications and guides out there. I mean, in the publications area, in the UK, we have a complete set of PDF specifications based on PDFX, which is a particular exchange format for the printing industry, from the Periodical Publishers Association. The Ghent Work Group publish loads of information on how to produce good PDFs, and they've just recently done one for wide format as well, Graham. I think.
Yeah, they have. Yeah.
And that's a very good start. But a printer needs to create confidence in his clients that he knows how to process their files correctly. And if the files come into him incorrect, I mean, it can give him all sorts of problems, which often he's then blamed for either not spotting or printing incorrectly. So, I mean, agreeing a simulation profile or a profile to use for analog presses is vital, and it's part of the color management workflow. How to produce good PDFs and some training and some documentation for the clients. As I said before, those 20% of clients that give you 80% of your work. And sadly, and this is a bit of a hobby horse of mine, which I'm starting with a number of people, certainly in the UK, the art schools, the universities, the colleges, which are training the graphic designers, do not train them very well on printed media. They have never seen the color management settings in Photoshop. They've certainly not been trained how to make press-ready PDFs. And when I'm talking to people on this, I say, well, can you imagine an architect coming out of university who is a brilliant designer, not being trained and not being able to make the correct technical drawings and specifications for the building or bridge he has actually designed? It's inconceivable. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine a car designer sitting in Ford's design studio actually designing a car door handle that is impossibly expensive to make? No, he knows or she knows the process. So you need to know the production process. And I'm trying to get a little campaign together here in the UK so that we can actually talk to the schools and colleges about this problem. Now, why don't we try and sort it out at source?
And I think you're right, Paul. And I think in the wide format and screen sectors, where you've got so many printed products being manufactured, things like trapping, things like cutters, and there are so many elements that could be better understood. I would love to join that mission with you, because I think it is really, really important. And I would add that knowing some senior lecturers in graphic design colleges, I know that the emphasis is on visual communications, is on the semantics and the creating effective design. But of course, effective design that isn't conceived for production can result in a total mess. So I think there is absolutely so much value in even having a part of a course module where students are guided, because we all know as print professionals that the results that you achieve are codependent on the quality of the design is actually fit for the process, and then that the files are set up to achieve production success. So I agree.
One of your coffee breaks was with Brian from C Design, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And he actually said that he has to train designers out of college in this area within his company before they can produce the files necessary for printers. But I mean, there's all sorts of ifs, buts going on. I mean, there are what's called exchange CMY color spaces, wide gamut CMY color spaces. When in doubt, a designer can use that and then put a README in with a file saying, we are uncertain how this is going to be reproduced. This file is in this color space. Please convert it to the color space which is suitable for the production. So it will be a color space which encompasses the widest possible CMYK. They could keep it as RGB, as long as it then went to a printer who had the right technology and knowledge to convert it to his space. It's all about communication, and there are good ways around it. The whole textile digital world is interesting. I mean, there's a beta RGB encompassing profile for working with textiles based on exactly the same philosophy, that you may not know exactly what printer you're going on.
Well, Fogra, was that Fogra
55, I think, isn't it?
55, okay.
I think it's, I don't know. Fogel got a lot of beta profiles out for testing at the moment.
Yeah.
If anybody's interested, just go on their website. Fascinating work going on in all these areas.
I think in textile, there's a particular challenge because it's come from being a market fueled by 21 color rotary presses with many spot colors, and then trying to bring that into the gamut of single pass inkjet results in a huge amount of compression of color and yeah, frightening level of disappointment if you're not engineering to the target correctly.
Well, it's interesting, color gamut and wide format. I mean, it's huge. I mean, the Epsom Shore colors can reproduce about 98% of Pantone coated. Some of the other presses have a much more limited gamut and can barely make a coated litho CMYK gamut. Hence the importance of the device profiles, as we have said.
Yeah.
And there are little tools out there where you can check this. You can put your device gamuts into tools against and put special colors up against them, and it will tell you how accurately they reproduce. Very important.
Okay. We're not even going to get started on spot color. So I think we might have to save that one for another day.
At least 2 hours on that.
Yeah, the fifth question today is really about ink saving, and is it true that we can save a considerable amount of ink by setting up the profiling with care? So Craig, as you've been my victim for first answers all the way through, let's stay on that approach and see what you have to say.
Well, yeah, obviously having a properly or correctly profiled press is going to save you ink. It's going to save you time because you're not having to firefight all the time in production. So you're going to get a right first time job if you profile. But in addition to that, when you build the profiles, you can build GCR into the profile, and a lot of RIP manufacturers will also supply at an additional cost.
Sorry, Craig, can you just for anyone that isn't aware, can you just say what GCR is, please?
It's grey component removal.
Okay.
So so basically there are other systems that you have to buy within the RIP, which give you ink optimization, so they give you a greater amount of ink reduction that could be built into the profile. Obviously, Paul will go into the technical details of this in a minute. But I favour colour servers. I like that way of doing it myself. So something like Alwan or GMG, I believe Colour Logic. There are lots of different systems out there that will do that and do it very well without you even noticing a difference in your image. And obviously, there are different levels that you can actually pull out when you optimize the file. So there's great savings. If you've got high ink usage, there's great savings to be made. When we first did that at DS Smith, we saved £35,000 a year on ink.
Wow.
That's just on the digital press, one digital press. Okay, so that paid for the software in under 6 months. So it's worth doing if you can make that investment, or at least investigate it, whichever one you decide to go with. Remember, I said earlier, it's about forming a partnership, because sometimes we're technical people, but we don't have all the technical abilities always. So you do need people like Paul and Malcolm from Colour Engine to assist you with those technical details that perhaps you don't really, from a day-to-day production point of view, you don't really have the time or the energy to try and put into that thing. But yeah, I think the server solutions are the most effective way of doing it. But if you can't afford that, then the RIP solutions are very good too. So don't be put off. Just investigate it, have a look, because it can save you a lot of money by putting in this type of profiling, putting time into profiling.
Perfect, thank you. Paul, we're quite tight on time, but I know you've got several points that you'd like to make on this one.
I'll be quick, yeah. I mean, as Craig just alluded to in his last comment, colour servers are great, and I think they should be, you know, you should buy a colour server in the same way you'd buy a copy of Adobe CC if you're a printer. You know, it should be part of your normal armoury. But when you're making a device profile with the modern profiling systems, which is sometimes actually online, certainly nearline on wide format presses, if you set your grey component replacement and your total area coverage and lower it, you can get considerable ink savings without sacrificing the quality of the image at all. If you want to be really sophisticated, you can make from the data set that's created by the measurements, and then you take that data set and you can make a number of profiles from that data set with a number of settings. You could be more and more aggressive with the settings. You can take those profiles and put them into some little applications. There's one called ColorThink.
Yeah.
And you can actually see the gamut and the gamut shape of the profile. So you can very quickly see how far you can take this aggressive approach to ink saving. Excuse me. In an exercise I did on litho a few years ago, we took the FOGA 39 data set, which is the older coated profile for offset. And we produced a number of profiles with the more modern color management software, other than what was initially used to create the FOGA 39 profiles, say, you see. And we went right way down from 350% total area coverage right down to, believe it or not, 220. And then we printed them all up together, and most people couldn't see a difference. This was flesh tones, it was all sorts of clever images. And I still have a few sheets here. And the savings on a litho press were, you know, could be up to 30%, depending upon the imagery and the coverage, of course. So it's modern, it works. It's a development of a system years ago called undercolor removal, which is much more manual, but all of this is built into the color management software, and it does it very accurately and very well with the more modern systems. I
suppose it does point to the fact that there are quite a few cases where RIPs are installed. Sales reps maybe offer RIPs but don't offer a full comprehensive sense of everything they can do. So it's worth looking, isn't it, and taking that sort of deep dive into your product.
Yeah, for instance, if you've got an EFI Fari running a digital device, you might not be offered its color profiling suite by default. You'll probably get an i1 Pro or something similar spectrophotometer to calibrate the thing, but you might not get the the profiling suite. You might have a demo version of it. I mean, like anything else, it's far cheaper to buy it as you buy the press, because you can negotiate rather than pay for it later as an add-on.
Sure. Okay. Well, thank you both for all the interesting answers. We've got a few questions in the Q&A, so let's. I'm going to access that now, and then we're going to take a dive in, and let's see. So I've got a question for Craig here. So pre-press, CTP/CTS in full automation, offset screen, flexo, rotogravure, it's a must to focus on color management, reproducibility, repeatability, productivity, and cost efficiency. Do you agree with this statement?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's quite an easy one to answer.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you've got those systems, in fact, other than computer to screen, probably it's a lot easier on all of the other systems. And the only reason I say that is because of the sheer physical size sometimes of screens, if you're in large format, then that becomes, more difficult to handle those screens. But obviously in the smaller format machines, it can be done. I think when we were having a discussion before, Paul showed me a little handheld device where you can measure the dot on the screen. So that obviously that makes it a lot easier to put in those controls.
Okay, cool. We've got a question for you, Paul. Multi-printing systems in-house, digital offset, screen, flexo, etc., plus finishing processes are fundamental to fulfill new customer requirements, adding differentiation and added value to the products. I'm not sure whether that's a statement or a question.
I think what they're trying to say is, if you've got multiple processes, then you do need, the color management systems and the process control we've spoken about. But of course, all of these different printing systems are capable of also adding their own unique functions. Digital can do variable data, screen can do amazingly vibrant special colors. You often see screen used in conjunction with digital, don't you, in the point of sale area? And there's all these embellishment techniques you can do with varnishes, UV varnishes, all these sort of areas, which will give added value. I have my own opinion on the environmental aspects of some of that, but this is not the place for that area. But what we're talking about here is the CMYK world and how we get that confidence into the printer. But then, yes, all these other processes will have their own individual advantages in certain market areas.
Okay, cool. I've got a question for you, Craig, from my good friend Jacek from Poland. Hi, Jacek. Good to see you.
Yeah.
He's saying he says hello. Thanks for the very interesting discussion. May I ask Craig for the model of CTF CTS system that you were using and any recommendations? He didn't hear it properly during the presentation, and he just says he sends us all his the best regards to us and all the attendees today. So yeah, which CTS would you?
So we started with an inkjet system, which was from Tima. It was called a data screen. I don't think that one's made anymore. I could be wrong.
That was a flat table one, wasn't it?
It was a flat table. And then we moved on from there to a CST machine. The one we had was kind of a reconfigured Lucia. But, the Lucia, the Syntronic, the CST machine, they're priced at different points. It all depends on
resolution, right?
Yeah. And it all depends on what you actually trying to do. We used to do, just as an instance, on the CST machine, we were using a Kiwo emulsion Z110 as a hybrid emulsion, and we used to image a screen which was 3.3 wide in under 15 minutes. The developing used to take 10 minutes to develop the screen. So it was quite fast and very accurate. So that's that system. But, you've got to go out and do your research onto which one you prefer. One of the issues we used to get on the CST was through cure sometimes when we were doing the profiling. So look at those things when you go and see them. That's what I'd say, thoroughly test.
Yeah. And I think resolution is the key to cost, isn't it, with CTS? So if you're working in the resolution capability for DLP laser for very, very high detail applications such as printed electronics, they can achieve incredible results. In fact, I wish I had slightly longer arms because I could reach over to my desk and get an example of, in fact, do you know what? No, I'm not gonna tempt fate. I'll only fall off my chair. But yeah, the capability is absolutely there, and in fact, it's about matching the resolution to your output requirement, isn't it? Because both the impact of cost of capital equipment and speed of operation are both intrinsically linked to that thing. Okay, we have another question here that I think, Paul, if you can give us I don't know how you're going to do a rapid fire answer to this one, but I'm going to give you the challenge. So the throwdown is, this is from Damir Benek in Croatia. Can you give an example of 3 to 5 of the most common PDF mistakes?
Yeah, I saw this question, and I guess you might ask me. So I've been giving it a thought. Wrong size, no trim marks, no bleed marks, fonts not embedded, wrong color space, hidden items. I came across one only last week where the printer's rip was falling over. It was a PDF out of InDesign and looked perfectly okay. Took ages to rip, and then you had to dive deeply into it, and there was another page hidden behind the PDF, and all the designer had done, he'd put a white panel on top of that and designed it again completely on top of the white panel. Think about that. I mean, dozens and dozens of different ones out there. That's the problem, you know. If you don't understand what you're making, you can make all sorts of mistakes without realizing it.
Yeah.
I mean, PDF is supposed to solve all our problems. It's just brought out a whole load more.
And it will if it's done properly.
Yeah, as I said before, it's as easy when you've got the knowledge and as quick to make a press-ready PDF as it is to make a poor PDF.
Thank you, Paul. That was a very comprehensive and succinct response to the question, so I appreciate it. We've got one final question. Would like to add. David Smith would say he'd like to add his experience on actual industrial screen printing applications like IMD, automotive, textile transfer, ceramic decals, etc., where CTS technology using dedicated RIP software to screen print makes an enormous difference on setup standards and on your select image management and repeatability. Really a dream. Yeah, I think there's no doubt that if you have the throughput of screens to justify the investment, the capital investment, CTS is an absolute game changer, isn't it, from film? But you just have to have some volume to be able to do it. And finally, David said, which is very kind of him, top conference, congratulations. So I'm going to now say thank you both, Paul and Craig, for great answers today. Unfortunately, we're all as good as out of time. So I wanted to thank everyone for their participation, and please ask you to come back in our the next of our second series of FESPA Coffee Breaks in June, when we'll be looking at ISO standards for printing, how they're developed, and why they're worth understanding. That registration link will be sent out in due course. If you're interested in watching this webinar again, or recommending it to friends, then it's going to be on FESPA TV on YouTube. Should be from tomorrow or the day after. We will be sending out a survey following this event, and we really would ask as many of you as possible, please, to complete it and send it back to us with any observations or comments that you have. They're all very much welcome and help us to do a better job. So thank you. I'm now going to share again the slide with our contact details. And it just leaves me to say thank you, Craig and Paul, for your time today. It's really appreciated by us all. And yeah, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Graham. Thanks, Graham.
Thank you, Graham. Thanks, Paul.
All right, cheers. Bye for now. Bye-bye.
Bye.